Hello, LinkedIn Live, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, Periscope, and of course, YouTube. My name is Frank Lavinia, and I have a number of URLs, podcasts, etc., etc. Just thought I would do a quick live stream today to check in, see how you're doing. My schedule today was kind of turned upside down. So, want to do no book review per se today, but there is something I wanted to talk about, and it's about one of my favorite magazines of all time. It is no longer with us, sadly. It's Omni magazine, and Omni magazine. If you're not familiar with this, I actually did a live stream about this before, and that's why the caption of this live stream is Omni magazine revisited. Omni magazine was a science and technology and kind of sci-fi magazine from the 1980s. Believe it actually started in 1979-ish, late 70s. And for me, the older I get, the more I realize like kind of an outsized impact that this magazine has had on me, and really stoking the flames of my interest in science and technology. But first, let me reacquaint you with the world that was. In when I was a kid in my neighborhood, STEM was not encouraged. Let's put it that way. All these people are lamenting about how people are not encouraged to get into STEM careers in certain conditions. Very rarely were people, at least growing up for me, were STEM encouraged. And growing up in kind of a blue collar area of New York City, it was definitely, I was the odd kid, like on the playground, right? I was interested in things like that, robots and computers. I mean, Star Wars definitely had an impact on me, and and my dad was a Star Trek fan, and I think it had an impact on him too. Although he didn't go to college or follow a science career. I mean, he was a electronics repairman, so I guess you can kind of say he did. But one of the things that fascinated me about Omni magazine, and the reason why this came up, is the last stream I did on Omni magazine. An artist in the Netherlands reached out to me because he's in art school, and he's doing a project about kind of resurrecting an old magazine. And he was researching, oddly enough, conspiracy type stuff. And he was kind of intrigued that you could have a magazine that had kind of fringe type topics and mainstream science all under one roof, as it were. And that was the magic of Omni magazine. Like, so I actually bought a copy off eBay. I think it's like $15. I really wish I had saved all of mine. So this is the one I showed before. I want to buy another one, but I don't know. So this is from February 1987. And I mean, just look at this. Look at this title. I mean, look at this cover, right? I mean, that just screams 80s, right? It doesn't get much more 80s than this, right? I mean, she's not Max Headroom, but she definitely has a Max Headroom kind of vibe. And the topic, I mean, science and censorship, right? That sadly, that's as timely today as it was in 1987. So what was interesting about Omni magazine is that they had different sections. So the cool thing about this was they had different sections, right? So there was definitely, the paranormal section was under an area called Continuum, and it always had that silver background. So you kind of knew based on the background, these are like little stories and stuff like that. And this is years before, I mean, yeah, technically the internet existed, but the web certainly didn't exist. The internet wasn't really a thing. But it was definitely out there. But it was really cool. And then it had another section. Come on, where is it? A red section. That's what it was. On antimatter. And this was just the UFO section, right? So you had that bold kind of print. And what was interesting about this, because the artist guy, he kind of sent me a bunch of of questions to answer. What was the tone of the magazine? What was it about? And I mean, what was interesting about this is that they did cover UFO stuff, but it wasn't like a lot of. I'm going to annoy a lot of people, but uh, and I can see I'm dropping on my people that were watching. I'm not talking about UFOs, but it was just interesting how they were able to kind of look at these kind of fringe topics with a fairly objective mindset. But that's not why I tuned into Omni. Omni was just inspiring, right? Because there was talk about you know. Uh, there was just discussions on science topics, right? Pop science topics, right? And the Wikipedia article refers to this as the magazine for the armchair scientist, and I kind of read that, and that to me it smells a little elitist. But I mean that's basically what it was, you know. I mean now we have YouTube channels like the King of Random or Joe Scott. I think it's Joe Scott Answers with Joe, and then Tom Scott is another guy where they are scientists. I know Tom Scott is at least, and they talk about kind of technology issues in a more approachable way. And I think this really did that. This really opened up kind of my mind as a kid. And there was always these short science fiction stories. I hated reading as a kid, unfortunately, but I wasn't going to sit through and read like a big book, but kind of a short story. I remember reading a short story. I would look forward to them, right? Because they weren't, not they were a very short read, and I mean, it was just great. I mean, it was just kind of like, it was my doorway into a much larger world of science fiction, and I mean, for me, it inspired me. And what's really funny, if you look here, there was this Omni magazine TV special, and I remember watching this. Right, it had Peter Ustinov in it and stuff like that, and it was just fun. I blogged it on franksworld.com, so check it out. The Omni magazine commercials were also very kind of avant-garde at the time, and that's one of the questions that the artist guy asked was, how do you how did you come across it? And I remember watching in my grandparents' house a commercial for Omni magazine where it was just a guy talking over some really sci-fi looking pictures. And I found the commercial, so I'm going to post that later today. But I mean, ultimately, that's what inspired me. I mean, I probably would have gotten into STEM anyway. I mean, my parents basically told me, kind of doctor, lawyer, engineer, or else was my career path. But I mean, this was just cool, right? So like they had a TV special. I think they had like a couple, but this one I do remember because it had Peter Ustinov in it, and he would like talk about like bionics, and it was just really cool. And it was always a little out there, right? So it wasn't like one of those things where it was just wacky out there, but it was always kind of centered, right? It always had kind of a theme, and the theme was basically the science of the frontier, right? And an optimistic look forward at the future. So it was a great magazine. I know they've tried to revive it, but it's just hard to kind of do that. So I have my first question from Thomas. How's it going, Thomas? What are some of the magazines, books I would turn my kids on today? That's a good question. I wouldn't want to say magazines are dead per se, but my older son's really into these the National Geographic books or the fact books, or 101 facts about the national parks and that sort of thing. I also think I've also turned them on to Curiosity Stream. We watch a lot of kind of educational stuff. Last night we were watching something about the creation of the internet, and he really dug it because, like, he was born, in the age of the internet. I mean, and he just doesn't understand that, there was a time before the internet. And I kind of like me, when I was a kid, I couldn't understand a time before color TV, or to a lesser extent cable, and for him to kind of see, this is why the internet was created. And they talked about DARPA, which his mom used to work at DARPA. So it was kind of like, I think for him, connecting him to history. And he now believes me when I tell him that, there was a time the internet didn't exist. Can you imagine? And so for me, I'm hoping kind of those educational videos and stuff. We watched another interesting history documentary. It's called, it was about Alexander the Great. And it's on Curiosity Stream. They're not a sponsor, But hey, if you're watching Curiosity Stream, call me. I'd love to have you sponsor my streams and podcasts and blog and all that good stuff. But it was kind of like, talking about in context of, Alexander the Great and what he accomplished and where he failed. He enjoyed it. I dig history, so left to my own devices, I might have been a history major in college. Who knows? But that was not an option. But another thing that I think would blow people's minds today is cigarette ads. Let me see if I can find one. Cigarette ads, actual, honest to God, ads for cigarettes and magazines. Can you believe it? So I really like to see what this artist comes up with. I'd like to have him on a live stream. He can kind of talk about the project. I would love to get more copies of this. At one point, all the magazines were online, but apparently not anymore. There is one issue on Amazon Reading, and yes, season pro making. I love Curiosity TV, so like I'm kind of I think it's well established I'm kind of a nerd, right? Yeah, so I do have a Disney Plus subscription. I tried to, don't hate me. I tried to watch the first episode of WandaVision. I honestly don't get it. Like, I seriously don't understand it. I seriously don't understand it. I was watching it and I was like, after about 10 minutes, I'm sure there's something there, but I may cancel my Disney subscription and to wait for the Book of Boba Fett. I got Disney mostly for The Mandalorian. But yeah, so I have subscriptions to the Great Courses Plus and Curiosity TV. So that's 90% of the TV I watch is that, so I'm all about that nerdy stuff and getting better at these things. I mean, there's a great, again, also Great Courses Plus. Let me impress Thomas one more time by making a pitch. If Great Courses Plus wants to sponsor any of my live feeds, podcasts, or blog, feel free to find me. But Great Courses Plus is pretty good too. They have a really good course on quantum physics and quantum mechanics, which, getting into quantum computing is definitely kind of, you don't need to do it, but it definitely helps. The professor that they have on that, I forget her name. I think she teaches out of somewhere in North Carolina, does a really good job of explaining some of the weirder aspects of kind of the electron flows and stuff like that. And that was when I watched that, it finally clicked in my head. National Geo on Disney Plus is great. That's right, because Disney owns them now. Disney owns pretty much everybody now. But yeah, I will have to definitely check that out. I think that's Jeff Goldblum's thing, right? I will definitely have to check that out. Although when you say D plus, I think there's also the Discovery Channel. I think has their own streaming service too. So I mean, that's the great thing about the internet. A lot of people will hate on the internet and this, but I mean, there's so much educational material on there. When my son asked me how something worked, I think it was how electricity is generated. I mean, there's hundreds of things to build on that, right? When I built my little solar generator in the backyard, and let me know in the comments if you want me to cover that. One day I will. I did it once with the phone, but it was really shaky and really bad, but I will do it again. I watched tons of videos on how people build their own solar cells and their own backup power systems. Mine is not that fancy, but just the fact that 90% of what I learned was from YouTube. The rest were for some books here and there. So I think it's there's enormous potential with the internet. So let me play this. So it was cool because Peter Ustinov goes through. He does a really good job narrating this, and they talk about. And it's funny because there's this one scene where this lady is a electronic music composer, and keep in mind, it said it came out in 1987. That sounds about right. But she's writing code, she's making music, and they talk about synthesizers and stuff like that. I mean, I think at one point they show her kind of like plugging and soldering some chips together. I mean, this is like the real deal. Like, I mean, this was that was cutting edge. And the whole notion that you could, when Peter Ustinov said it, like, that's how she makes music or something like that. She scored compositions for movies and TV and like without using an actual instrument, I mean, at the time that must have sounded far-fetched. I remember watching that thinking that's cool. Thomas, yes, that's right. I need to build out a list of potential sponsors I can work with into the podcast, because I think that we're all stuck at home. Traditional education has kind of gone sideways. I'm not happy with how my kids are doing school now, but that's a whole other thing. But there's a whole opportunity to improve yourself and learn and do more. But I do like that idea. Thomas. High five to Thomas for thinking that one up. But I definitely want to check out. Check out the National Geographic. That's my dog in the room. But yeah, Omni Magazine. I mean, go search for the commercials. Go watch this on YouTube. I mean, it's just I don't know if the Omni Magazine will ever come back, but they've had a couple of attempts, and it's just sometimes it's just you capture lightning in the bottle. The timing is right. The content is just perfect. And I mean, Wired Magazine is a great example of that. Wired Magazine at one point was like, the world, I wouldn't say my world revolved around it, but I mean, a lot of people in technology just ate that up. Wired Magazine, as of, the last maybe 10 years, I mean, it's another Condé Nast publication. It's like, if it's in front of me, I'll read it, but, speaking of composition, I will have to check that out. And your sister is on several arts dancing boards. Okay, cool. So it seems like some kind of AI generated art and stuff like that. There's a lot of interesting stuff in that regard. I mean, in some ways, we need Omni Magazine more now than ever. I mean, sorry you did. Oh, no worries. I mean, that's what Thomas, you've watched enough of these streams. I live for the interaction. I like reaching out, and I sidetrack on my own. So at least guide the sidetrack. But yeah, so one of the other things that fascinated me about Omni Magazine was the artwork, right? So obviously you saw kind of Max Headroom's sister here. But they had a whole bunch of art. Their art was just ridiculously ahead of its time. And most of this, I would imagine the later versions, they switched to Photoshop and stuff like that. But I mean, most of this was just, pan painted, or however artists would do things before Photoshop. But I mean, just and a lot of these would I think this is related to Dune, because they published a short segment on one of the Dune stories. But I mean, the artwork would usually kind of dovetail with like the story or the content. So what was this one about? And they have just different artwork. I mean, it's just amazing. And this book was pretty cool too. This was the oops, it's got one of those covers. The Mind's Eye, the art of Omni Magazine. Yeah, the art was just, I mean, for me, it was just fascinating because, at the time, science was just, there was no Sci-Fi Channel. There was no, if there was, we didn't have it. Science was just this thing that maybe there'd be like a Carl Sagan special on PBS, Channel 13. But that was like once a week. And, there was no iPhone, so you couldn't like watch it anywhere. And with the magazine kind of had it. And it was just, for me, all the puzzles in it, there were puzzles in it. And it just kind of, for me, it was very influential. And like kind of, as I was, he sent me a list of questions, and as I'm writing through, I'm like, wow, this really did have an impact on me. And, when I was a kid, for my birthday one year, I had, for a couple of years, that was my gift from my grandparents, was, a subscription on the magazine, to which they looked at me like I was insane, but c'est la vie. But yeah, so I mean, it was just enormously impactful. Obviously there were other magazines like Byte Computer and stuff like that, but there was no place where you could like just pick up stuff that's like, something that a teenager would just, or a tween would just get, you know what I mean, and just enjoy. And that was, the Omni Magazine was definitely it. But yeah, I highly recommend. I put it on Frank's World, and um, it's there. Go check it out. It's really amazing in terms of some of the stuff that was in Omni magazine. Some of the stuff, it's funny to look back now. There's an ad for, build your own 386 computer or 286 computer, which you kids probably don't know what that is. But it's just it's an interesting field. I mean, it's just an interesting kind of story. And then the commercials, I remember watching them. I always say if I ever started kind of a magazine, I'd want it to be kind of capture the zeitgeist that Omni did, or the zeitgeist that early Wired magazine did. I'd want to capture that. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I will do it, maybe I won't. But I mean, I think there's definitely a need for good science education, policy discussion. Obviously, in this one, they did delve a little into kind of the politics about, science funding and stuff like that, which it was a dirty business then. I'm pretty sure it still is. But I mean, it's just so much fun. Like there's, so much good stuff here, and it was just unique because, it covered mainstream science. It covered kind of fringe areas, but it did so in kind of a skeptical way. Like I remember, if you go to some UFO channels or YouTube or whatever, or websites, they believe everything. Sorry, I had to say it. They were pretty skeptical. They would be pretty harsh on some people. Like, there's one book that came out in the 80s. I forget the guy's name, but they ripped him a new one. So like when I saw him on like the History Channel, which History Channel isn't really about history anymore, is it? When I saw him on the History Channel, I'm like, I remember that name. And it was because it's just, I don't know. It's just, it's so such a good magazine. Here, this is a great one. Move up to a high-paying career servicing computers. I remember reading that as a kid. Oh, 16-bit compatible. Get started now by building a complete 16-bit IBM PC compatible. Can you imagine? Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in here. If you can pick up an old copy or just look on Amazon, they have kind of you can watch it through the app and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it was just when science was fun, when before the doom and gloom. It was just ahead of its time. But that's all I got. Thomas, I want to thank you for commenting. And thank you for enjoying my my curiosity pitch right there. See, yeah, I talk about all these sales books and stuff like that. See, I'm applying applied knowledge. Fill your brain, then use it. That's what I say. It's like gasoline, right? You don't fill up your tank in the car and use it, or charge up your Tesla, whatever floats your boat. Yeah, Omni magazine. A good way to describe Omni magazine. Somebody just ping me on a private chat, would be like if Elon Musk started a magazine like that, it would be Omni, because it would be that kind of swag and cool. That's the only way I can describe it. All right. So with that, my name is Frank Lavinia. Definitely check me out on franksworld.com. Go check out this this Omni Magazine's TV special from the 80s. Go to franksworld.com and let me know what you think. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you'd like to have, there it is, the guy there. Also had some fun talking about time travel here in this. I wasn't in the video, but I definitely spruced up their thumbnail. But with that, I want to wish you a fantastic Wednesday. It is Wednesday, right? So I will, there are no further questions. I'll see you on another day. You have a great afternoon, evening, whatever time it is in the world where you are. Have a great one.